I think that those videos resonated with a lot of people because it reflects the fact that there is a worldwide change underway, and not just among Muslims, and not even just among the people of the global South. People all over the world, including in the West itself, are recognizing that Western civilization is a failure. They're realizing that it is corrupt, that it is hypocritical, that it is immoral, that it is tyrannical and psychopathic. Now, most of the Muslim world and the global South has known this for a long time, and a lot of people in the lower class in the West have also known it for a long time. But because the neoliberal system, the neo-imperialist system, you can say, is now treating even the Western lands as lands for conquest, lands to conquer. And now people in America and Europe are themselves feeling the subjugation that their civilization imposed all around the world. Now it's happening to them, writ large. There are millions and millions of people in the West who now want nothing to do with Western civilization anymore. They realize that it's rotten and that it's always been rotten. They realize that even the moral values and principles, so-called, that they were taught emerged from the Enlightenment were actually stolen from someone else. They were stolen from other cultures. They were stolen from other civilizations, particularly from the Muslims. So this civilization, Western civilization, is like an identity thief, pretending to be what it isn't. It's an imposter. It's a thug wearing the clothes of a nobleman. Or more accurately, it's a criminal dressed up like a policeman. And you've got a lot of real criminals dressed up like policemen over there. But as I said, across the global South, among the long-standing victims of the West, obviously none of this is a revelation. And it's not something new to Muslims, certainly. But there are a few things that are different now. Today, there's a sense that the West and that America is imploding. So the people in the global South and the Muslim world are seeing that their tormentor is starting to show weakness, is starting to look weak. And all he ever had over us was power. It was only his power that made people be quiet. It was only power that made everyone in the world nod their heads whenever he spoke. But now there's a glimmer of hope because they're starting to see weakness. Every crack and fracture that you see in Western society, you have to understand, from the perspective of the global South and from the perspective of the Muslim world, every crack and fracture in Western society is like a crack and a fracture in the wall of a prison cell, and you start to see daylight peeking through those cracks. And that's different. That's not something that we've seen before until now. And everyone in the world is seeing it at the same time. So there's a subsequent, as a result of that, there's a revival of confidence in the global South countries and in the Muslim world. There's less and less inclination to capitulate to the West and to try to emulate the West and to want Western approval. And there's greater and greater inclination to try to move forward independently. So I think that's probably why those videos resonated, or seem to have resonated with a lot of people. And for Muslims specifically, we're just tired, you know. For at least the last 20 to 30 years, you've been bullying us with the label extremist, telling us which kind of Islam was going to be all right with you, even while you were invading our countries, bombing our cities, killing our families. Somehow, you were still able to bully us into thinking that we were the violent ones. The West was like a murderer who stabs someone and gets the victim's blood all over his own clothes, and then he starts screaming, "Help, help, I'm bleeding." You know, you were covered in our blood, but acted like you were the one who was bleeding. And we bent over backwards. For the last 20 years at least, Muslims have been bending over backwards to try to assure you. And you tricked us with the promise of acceptance and approval. And acceptance and approval from you meant that maybe you wouldn't bomb us. Maybe you wouldn't lock us up in Guantanamo Bay. So you tricked us into thinking that we had to conform to your values, to your principles, just to prove to you that we were civilized people who deserve not to be bombed and not to be locked up in Guantanamo Bay. It was like, when you try to access a website and you have to prove that you're not a robot, except it's a never-ending loop. Check this box to confirm you're a person. Now check this box to confirm you're a person. Now check this box and this box and this box and so on and so on and so on. And in the end, we never get accepted anyway. But during that whole process, over the last couple of decades, you showed us time and time again that the values and the principles that you wanted us to conform with, you don't even conform with. And we're going through this whole process of checking the boxes. And finally, we're checking all of these boxes until finally we get to a box that says that we have to accept gay marriage, and we have to accept that women can have penises. And at that point, the whole Muslim world collectively had an epiphany. Oh, well, these people are just crazy. Like I said, Western civilization is an imposter. And in 2023, you've been thoroughly found out. There is almost no one in the world who doesn't know who you really are. And nobody in the world anymore is inclined to play along with this role play game when you're pretending to be what you're not. And this is important because to a great extent, the West was actually able to impose cognitive dissonance even on us, even on Muslims. Even while you were killing us, even while you were jailing us, even while you were torturing us, there was a lot of Muslims who still wanted to be like you. A lot of Muslims were mesmerized by your words to the extent that they would overlook your actions or make excuses for your actions because you talk so high and mighty, You talked about such lofty morals. So it's disconcerting, it's disorienting because your actions have always been the polar opposite of what you talk about. But from 2001 to 2023, there's been a change. The lies of the West, the lies of Western civilization have become unsustainable, and the truth has become undeniable. And even millions of people in the West can see it now. They can see that it is an imposter civilization. They can see that you have only ever used morals and values as a camouflage, as a disguise. Like I said, what you have been doing to Muslim populations and populations across the global South, now you're doing to your own populations. So they can see you never believed any of that stuff about freedom and liberty and democracy. You don't even care if your own people starve. You don't care if your own people have a place to live. You don't care if they're sick. You don't care if they freeze in the wintertime. You don't care if they have clean drinking water. You don't even care if they mutilate themselves or mutilate their children. You don't care if your own people stop having babies and go extinct. It's all a sham. So the veil has been lifted and there's no putting it back. The wool has been pulled from over their eyes, from over the eyes of the world, and there's no pulling it back down again. But as I've talked about over and over again, my concern is that the societal implosion of the West is being misinterpreted and is being misunderstood because we think it means that we're going to be free, that our oppressor, like I said, has become weak. But that's not exactly what's happening. The West isn't collapsing, it's being conquered. And it's being conquered by private sector power, by the owners and controllers of global financialized capital. And that same power wants to conquer us too, all over again, just as we're seeing the chance to be free. This is why I've said for years that you have to understand who the real powers are, who the real enemies are, because the decline of the West, the decline of American state power, does not mean the creation of a multipolar world. It's still a unipolar world. And the unipolar power is the private sector. It's private sector power. And it has more control over our lives than any state or than any state ever has. That doesn't mean that a multipolar world isn't possible. It is possible. But the only way that it can be pursued is by accurately understanding what the real power in the world is today, so that we can develop genuinely effective strategies for confronting that power and competing with that power and resisting that power and overcoming it and developing our own power. That's the only way. If you don't understand who you're fighting, there's no way you can win the fight.